When I stepped into the upstairs bathroom that evening and realized my stepson Liam was already there, I had no idea that a quiet, ordinary Tuesday would tilt into a moment that would quietly redefine the emotional landscape of our home. Because nothing about that day had hinted at anything unusual, the house had been wrapped in its familiar calm, the kind that settles in when routines repeat themselves without friction. And Liam, who had come home earlier than usual, had parked his car neatly in the driveway and moved through the house with that same contained, thoughtful energy he always carried, no longer a boy but not quite settled into adulthood either, someone who spoke little yet seemed to observe everything. And after I set down my bag and slipped out of my shoes, the faint sound of running water upstairs caught my attention, a harmless detail at first, yet paired with a strange heaviness in the air that I couldn't quite explain. Especially with Patrick away on business and the house feeling larger, emptier, almost too quiet. And as I climbed the stairs and noticed the bathroom door left slightly ajar, something Liam never did die paused, torn between respect for his privacy and an instinct that nudged me forward. And when the door shifted and he turned suddenly, startled, the embarrassment that followed was immediate and mutual, his composure slipping just enough to reveal something fragile beneath the surface, and though I apologized and tried to retreat, there was something in his expression, a tightness around the eyes, a nervous energy that didn't belong to a simple misunderstanding. And when I gently asked if everything was okay, the words opened a door he had clearly been holding shut for a long time. And as he sat down, struggling to explain himself, it became clear that what he was carrying had little to do with the moment itself and everything to do with uncertainty, self-doubt, and the quiet fear of not knowing whether what he was experiencing physically, emotionally, internally was normal. And as I listened, carefully choosing reassurance over advice, the bathroom became less a room and more a confessional space, a place where he allowed himself to admit that he felt lost, disconnected, unsure of where he fit or who he was becoming, especially with a father he loved but couldn't quite open up to. And I realized then that he wasn't seeking answers as much as he was seeking safety. Someone who would listen without judgment, and when I told him that confusion didn't mean something was wrong, that growth often felt exactly like this. His shoulders eased, just slightly, as if the permission to not have everything figured out had been something he desperately needed to hear. And when the conversation ended and the evening moved on, the house returned to its quiet rhythm, yet something subtle had shifted between us, an unspoken awareness that lingered in passing glances and half-finished sentences over the next few days. Not dramatic or obvious, just present enough to be felt. And when Patrick returned home, life resumed on the surface. But beneath it there was a tension I couldn't ignore, a sense that Liam was wrestling with thoughts he hadn't yet found words for, and when he finally approached me again, hesitant and unsure, admitting that he felt different, not just confused, but emotionally overwhelmed in a way he didn't understand, I recognized the weight of that moment and steadied myself, reminding him that feelings, especially complicated ones, didn't make him broken or wrong. That identity and belonging were not puzzles solved overnight, and as he spoke, his honesty deepened. His fear of being a burden, his anxiety about crossing invisible lines. And when he finally confessed that his emotions toward me had become tangled and difficult to interpret, the air between us grew heavy with the gravity of it, not charged with action, but with consequence. And I responded not with rejection or panic, but with calm clarity, acknowledging the courage it took to speak while reinforcing the boundaries that mattered. Explaining that connection and care could exist without being acted upon. That not every feeling needed to become a decision, and in that quiet exchange no raised voices. No sudden movements, something essential happened. A moment of recognition where he felt heard without being encouraged towards something he wasn't here ready to understand. And though emotions surged beneath the surface for both of us, we allowed the moment to soften rather than escalate, letting silence do the work words could not. And afterward, life moved forward in small, careful steps, Liam retreating at times into himself, then slowly re-emerging, processing, reflecting. Learning that discomfort didn't mean disaster, and that trust didn't require crossing lines. And in later conversations, on the couch or in the kitchen, or during quiet evenings when the house hummed softly around us, he spoke more openly about feeling trapped in his own thoughts, about fearing he would never feel certain of who he was. And each time I reminded him that uncertainty was not a flaw but a phase, one that passed more easily when shared, and as weeks went by, I saw the tension ease little by little, his posture less guarded, his silence less heavy, and though the memory of that night lingered as a turning point, it became just that, a point of change, not a path taken. And one evening as we sat outside watching the sun sink below the horizon, Liam thanked me quietly, not for answers but for patience, for listening, for not making him feel ashamed of his confusion, and in that moment I understood that what mattered most was not what almost happened, but what didn't, the choice to let understanding outweigh impulse. To let care exist without complication, and as the light faded and the house behind us glowed warmly, I knew that whatever uncertainties still lay ahead for him, he would face them stronger for having been seen. And that was where the story rested, not in action, but in restraint, not in secrecy, but in trust. A chapter closed gently, leaving space for growth rather than regret.